over the past few years, as I've really started to think about what it is I want to do with my life, I've noticed one word seems to always pop up, and that's calling. Like, what is my calling? What does God want me to do? Does he want me to stay? Does he want me to go? Am I supposed to leave this town? Am I supposed to stay at this job? Leave this job? And what I think, oh man, so I already lost my spot. But if we are supposed to leave or whatnot, how do we know how to transition? How do we move from where we are to where God wants us? I can take like a year or two or maybe even 3 to have like a smooth transition, right? And like with me, sometimes I get so caught up in the planning and the right timing that I can actually like forget to just start moving. Like for instance, 2 years ago, I bought a piano, and for 2 years now, I've been saying, I cannot wait to learn how to play piano. Because I want to wait until I'm in a good season, where I can practice a lot, because in the fall I'm coaching football, and then I have my life group, and then there's the high school group, and I can't play on Mondays because there's Monday Night Football, and the million other excuses. And here I am 2 years later, and I could play one half of one song. And all the planning, I've just forgotten to just do it. And one of the things I love about the Bible is when God calls individuals into action, just the reckless abandon that they respond with. When David, a young shepherd, was called to face Goliath, the greatest warrior in the whole Philistine army, you know what he does? He marched out to Goliath, all 10 feet of him, and said, "This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel." He was a shepherd giving death threats to an entire army. Or what about when God commanded Abraham to leave his homeland, to leave everything he knew, to go to a mysterious land he would show him later on? I can just imagine how that conversation went with his wife. So honey, where is it we're moving to? I don't know. Like, oh, okay, well, how long will it take? Oh, babe, I don't know. It's like, well, what do you know? That we have to go. It's just reckless faith. When Jesus encounters Peter for the first time in Luke chapter 5, Peter, he was having a bad fishing day. Jesus came up to him and said, "Hey, throw your nets on the other side of the boat." Peter's like, "You don't know what you're talking about." Jesus like, "Just do it." He does it. He catches so many fish that the nets start to break. And then he looks at Peter. He says, "From now on, you don't have to just catch fish. From now on, you can be a fisher of people. You can be a fisher of men." And Scripture says something crazy. It says that the disciples left everything. Like, we can just read by that and not even think about it. Like, consider that in your own lives. Like, leave my job. I trained for this. I went to college for this. Leave my comfort, leave my family, leave my neighborhood. These guys are like first ballot Hall of Famers when it comes to faith and the Bible. But as great as they were in the lives they led, they all had their struggles. Like, they all knew adversity. Like, they knew it well. They knew fear and pain and guilt. Driven by jealousy, King Saul, Israel's king before David, tried to kill David 12 times. Once he was king, David was engaged in constant warfare to defend Israel. And David not only committed adultery with Bathsheba, but he had her husband killed so he could have her all to himself. Abraham, on one occasion, accepted money and livestock for his wife when the Pharaoh of Egypt wanted to buy her. But then God put a plague on the Pharaoh in order to get her back to Abraham because selling her wasn't a part of his plan. And then later, when they got impatient and tired of waiting for God to give them a child, as he promised them he would, he had a kid with his wife's servant. The wife she got jealous, banished her and the baby. And then God, of course, keeps true to his promise. They have their own kid, and now those two bloodlines are still at war today. And then there's Peter. Peter had a reputation for his impulsiveness. When the time came for Jesus to tell the disciples that he was going to be killed, he tried reprimanding Jesus. He took him aside. He's like, do you really think that's good for morale? Huh? Don't you go saying that again. Like he was trying to rebuke Jesus. And then Peter also, he fell asleep in the garden when Jesus asked him to stay up and pray with him just before he was taken into custody. And then Peter denied Jesus 3 times on the day he died. See, all 3 of these extraordinary men, they knew their callings. They knew what God wanted from them, and yet they experienced hardship and disappointment and failures. And the honest truth is, that's going to happen. There's no escaping that. But what we can do is we can learn how to use the challenges of this life as opportunities to grow and to learn. So this morning, I'm going to show you guys how to handle the heat of this life just a little better. And I bring this up because I really do think some Christians feel like, hey, I got saved and I'm following Jesus. Like, why is all this bad stuff happening to me? And I think, there has to come a moment where you go like, wait a sec, if there's an absence of adversity in my life, there might be an absence of growth as well. Like, we cannot just run from the challenges of this life. Jesus, he didn't promise that everything was going to be better. He just promised that he would be with you. So we got to learn how to deal with the heat better. I want to look at two scriptures this morning, two scriptures that are both very similar and at the same time very different. The first one comes from the book of James. Now, the book of James was written by Jesus' brother, which I think we can all imagine would have been very interesting. If you have a sibling, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about here. Have you heard of the thing sibling rivalry? Yeah, there would have been none of that with James and Jesus. No matter what James did, he'd come home, hey, Mom, I had a good day, I got an A. And then Jesus would come home, like, hey, Jesus, how was your day? It was good, Mom, I saved everybody. Tough to be James. And he writes a letter to a bunch of people who are going through it. Not everything's going perfect, not, I'm following Jesus, so everything's going great now. These people are being chased out of their homes. They're being hunted down. They're being put in prison, put to death, like they were going through it. And James wrote them this letter. Now let's pick it up in chapter 1, verse 2. It says, "Consider it a sheer gift, friends, when tests and challenges come at you from all sides. You know that under pressure, your faith life is forced into the open, and it shows its true colors. So don't try to get out of anything prematurely. Let it do its work in you so you become mature and well-developed, not deficient in any way. If you don't know what you're doing, pray to the Father. He loves to help. You'll get his help and won't be condescended to when you ask for it." And then it goes down. Listen to what it says in verse 12. This is my favorite part. "Anyone who meets a testing challenge head on and manages to stick it out is mighty fortunate. For such people loyally in love with God, the reward is life and more life." So James is encouraging these regular believers who are going through some drama and some challenges, and he's saying, hey, number one, you're not alone. And number two, the best reward in this life is not having a life free of controversy and free of drama, but actually getting through it. And then, sorry guys. And then it got me thinking, like, what if the controversies and the trials that David and Abraham and Peter went through actually helped them become who they were? Like, what if it was actually a big part of their life? I think there comes a day as a Christian where we start to look at some storms and some challenges and say, I was born to fight for this. Like, yeah, it's going to be tough. Yeah, I might fail, but I'm going to consider it a gift when challenges come at me from all sides, because I'm going to become more mature and more developed, not deficient in any way. And then I just love what it says in verse 12. Anyone who meets a testing challenge head on and manages to stick it out is mighty fortunate. For such people loyally in love with God, the reward is life and more life. I mean, life and more life. What other reason do we need than that? And this passage that we find here in the book of James reminds me of the women who went to Haiti in 2012. This amazing group of women went down to Haiti to teach Haitian women sex ed, self-defense, and God's design. Now, if you don't know much about Haiti, it is a men-driven society. Like, a wife's role is to satisfy their husband's desire whenever they say so, and can often get abused if they say no. This trip took place when the tent cities were everywhere due to the destruction from the earthquake. And it was fairly common for a drunk man to stumble into any tent he wanted, and if there wasn't a man there to protect them, the women would get taken advantage of. I mean, these women went into places like Cité Soleil, which is the worst slum in the entire Western Hemisphere, to teach women how to protect themselves physically and sexually and emotionally. They were teaching these women about God's heart for them, and to make sure they weren't just talking about this love, they got down on their hands and knees, and they pampered these women with foot massages and pedicures, and they cleaned their feet. Now, you can imagine how a place like this would feel about a group of American women coming in and giving hope and courage and worth to their women. Like, rather than using a giant courtyard, they would go teach in like a small little white tent so that the men wouldn't see and get angry. And on one occasion, they had a threat come to the gate. I mean, can you imagine that? Can you imagine going into a place like that and doing the job they did? Like, I don't think there's a better definition of walking head-on into a storm than that. But if you ask any of the girls on the trip how it went, they would say that it was amazing and it was life-giving. Because for such people loyally in love with God, the reward is life and more life. So the next time you're facing a challenge or an obstacle, consider it a gift and look at the opportunity as a chance to mature and to become more developed in your faith. And if you get scared or don't know what you're doing, pray to the Father. He loves to help. It says it right there in the passage. So the message here is that we have hope. Hope in our challenges, hope in our adversity, hope even in our darkest hour. And where we find this hope brings me to the second scripture we're going to look at. And if you're thinking to yourself, I bet it has something to do with an anchor, you're absolutely correct. It comes from Hebrews chapter 6. This is a promise that God made to Abraham that the writer of Hebrews is referring back to. It says, this is chapter 6, verses 13 and 19. For when God made a promise to Abraham, since he had no one greater by whom to swear, he swore by himself, saying, surely I will bless you and multiply you. And thus Abraham, having patiently waited, obtained the promise. For people swear by someone greater than themselves, and in all their disputes an oath is final for confirmation. So when God desired to show more convincingly to the heirs of the promise the unchangeable character of his purpose, he guaranteed it with an oath, so that by two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to lie, we who have fled for refuge might have strong encouragement to hold fast to the hope set before us. We have this as a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul. An anchor of the soul. An anchor for my soul. Does my soul have an anchor? What is a soul? Throughout the Bible, the soul is essentially summed up as our mind, our will, and our emotion. Oftentimes, the Old Testament uses the term heart. It's interchangeable with the New Testament term soul. Heart and soul, the center of who you are. And if you're like me, your mind, your will, and your emotions have a tendency to drift like a boat on a sea. And what an anchor does is it keeps you from drifting. It keeps you from tipping and ultimately keeps you from sinking. It's an agent of stability. It's an agent of security. It's an agent of steadiness, and you tether yourself to it. And though the elements are unpredictable and challenging, you remain and you last and you stay and you don't drown. The reason we find this letter in the book of Hebrews, a letter written to Hebrew people, written to Jewish believers who have accepted that Jesus is the promised Jewish Messiah, the one who'd been promised to them for thousands of years. The moment these people believed in Jesus, their lives dramatically changed because this was not a popular decision. They lost family, friends, they lost loved ones. Many would have lost their business or their job. And so the writer, he writes with a sense of urgency because these people are literally on the edge of giving up. He said, we've lost our safety, our livelihood, our credibility, our relationships, all because they decided that Jesus is the Messiah and I'm going to follow him. They started to question, is Jesus worth this? So the writer, he writes with diligence and passion and urgency, and he's telling them essentially two things in this letter, that Jesus is God, don't give up on Jesus, and Jesus is enough. So both of these letters, the one in James and this one in Hebrews, they're written to people who are being mistreated, who are being persecuted. Both letters talk about hope and perseverance and encouragement, but here's where they're different, but different in awesome ways. James says, consider these challenges as a gift. Look at it as a chance to become more mature, more developed, not deficient in any way. But the writer of Hebrews goes, hey, you have Jesus. Don't give up on him because he's all you need. He says, we have a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul. He says this beckons all the way back to Abraham. He says, we have an agent of stability in our mind, in our will, in our emotion. Here, the Hebrews need to be reminded that they have an anchor. And so today, I think we too need to be reminded that we have an anchor for our soul. Right now, we're living in such unsettled, uncertain times. This sermon doesn't come from I think someone might need this. It comes from my own heart. Just all the news coming in from around the world and even within our own country. It's so disappointing. It's so discouraging. The terrorist act in Paris, talks of war around the world. The news of injustice within our own nation and just the bigotry and the hatred. It's just heartbreaking. And I'm sure each era and generation can say something to this effect, but like our world needs light in it just more than ever. But just like the people in these letters, it can be easy to take one look around and just want to run in the other direction of what God might be calling you toward. But we have a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul. It says you and I need an anchor. But I'm not going to lie, I kind of wish that it didn't say anchor of the soul. I like helicopter of the soul. I really do, because an anchor implies what? We're going to hunker down and we're going to stay right here. I'd kind of like to escape, actually. But helicopter, just Jesus, come on down, pick me up. That's why I love you, man. It's like things are getting a little crazy. Just Jesus, beam me up. Jesus, beam me up. But he plays the role of an anchor, and we're like, oh no, that's not hunker down here. It's windy here. It's raining. There's waves. Like, you're just going to drop anchor right here, huh? All right. And it reminds me of stories. It reminds me of the story in Matthew 14 where the disciples find themselves in an unstable situation on a boat in a massive body of water during a storm. Jesus in Matthew 14, he says, hey, I'm going to go pray. You guys hop in the boat. I'll meet you on the other side. The disciples are like, how are you going to get there? He's like, don't worry about me. I have my ways. So they hop in the boat. Everything goes bad. Big storms, big waves. They're freaking out. What do they want? Helicopter! It's like, no more wind, no more waves. And Jesus comes walking to them, and get this, he says to them, everyone, stop being so afraid. Just quit it. And they're like, are you serious, Jesus? We're going to die. And so Peter, he goes, hey, Jesus, can I walk to you? This is the same Peter who left everything to follow him. Now he's in the middle of a storm, trying his hardest to trust Jesus. People say this all the time, that Peter walked on water. No, he didn't. He walked on waves. Like, we imagine him walking on just like a sheet of glass, just nice and easy. He was walking on waves. He was walking on whitecaps. And the Bible says Peter looked around, saw the wind and the waves, and started to sink. Jesus reaches down, pulls him up, storm still brewing, and he asks this question. He says, why did you doubt? Like, really? Like, is this a joke? Like, why am I doubting? Are you serious? Why am I doubting? I lost my job. I lost my marriage. I got a diagnosis from the doctor. Why am I doubting? Have you seen the wind? Have you seen the waves? Right now, ironically, I can barely hear what you said because it's so loud out here. Like, why am I? Are you serious, Jesus? Like, look around. Read the news. And Jesus says, why do you doubt? He's saying something. He always is saying something when he asks a question. He's never really asking a question. He's making a statement because he's the answer. So he doesn't genuinely ask questions. They are absolutely rhetorical at all times. He says, why do you doubt? What reason do you have to doubt? And I have so many. He says, but I'm always here. I'm always faithful. I was talking to a friend, and he was really discouraged, and he's like, things aren't going the way I thought. I've been really down on myself, and I lost sight of Jesus. And I was like, absolutely, man, it happens. Like, consider Peter. He had Jesus, physical, visible, tangible Jesus, walking on the water. We're talking sandals, sash, the full Jesus in form, and Peter couldn't even keep his eyes on visible Jesus because the waves sometimes get so big. See, and the problem with an anchor, just a small issue for us, is an anchor does its best work where it's never seen. When it plunges through the depths of the sea, hits the ocean floor, and anchors it to that which is under the ocean floor. See, and then we, in our souls, it's like a boat. We're just drifting on the water, and we're just like, I can't see the anchor. Are you sure it's attached? I can't see it. And as the story goes, John records the same story in John chapter 6, and he says that when Jesus got on the boat after he had the dialogue with Peter, that immediately the wind ceases and they were at where they were headed. And I thought, that's just like Jesus. The moment he's obviously in your boat, just you're where you thought you'd never be, and you're not really quite sure how you got there. And it got me kind of thinking, like, where's the proof of this anchor, like, in my life? And just like immediately it just hit me, and I was like, the fact that I am here, like the proof, like where I am in life is the proof. Because like I should have drifted so far from here. And I know many people, they always say like, well, I got God. Yeah, okay, well, God has got you. Like, here's the thing with Jesus. Like, you don't just anchor yourself to him. He anchors himself to you. So when I forget to hold on, when I get tired of holding on, or even when I don't want to hold on anymore, he's just, it's okay, son. I'm the anchor, you're the boat. Like, I got you. Does my soul have an anchor? What are some other places we might turn to for an anchor? Like, what else can be our rock, our stability, the thing that anchors us in life? I've heard things like, my job, my position, my retirement, my prominence, pretty logical answers, but they have holes, don't they? Because that which doesn't have a soul cannot aid what does have a soul. Like, your car will not help you when you're discouraged. It will not hold you even though it has heated seats. It will not hold you. It does not have a soul. Your house doesn't have a soul. Your job doesn't have a soul. It has no ability within itself to aid you in your mind, your will, and your emotions. So honestly, that logic falls flat. Now, some people will answer the question, my rock, my anchor, is my lady. It's my girl, my man, my husband, my wife, my boyfriend, my girlfriend, my best friend. Like, my man, that's my rock. He's godly. He's a man of God. But there's still a problem with that reply, because that soul is broken and fragmented just like your soul is broken and fragmented. So when you're frustrated because that soul's not there for you, that soul's going to reply, well, you're not there for me either. And what you have is an old Western standoff. It's like, well, I just felt like you didn't care and that you weren't there. Well, that's how I felt because you weren't there either. You're supposed to be there for me. Well, so are you. So we have a problem. See, we tie ourselves to each other and we both end up in a pit and we argue and complain, why haven't you got me out yet? I don't know. I was waiting for you to get me out. And the problem is we both can't. We're in this pit complaining to each other, but no one in this relationship has the power to get you out of the pit. So you need somebody or something with a soul so similar to yours that it knows your plight and condition, but a soul that's profoundly different than yours because this soul is flawless and perfect and whole. Therefore, it doesn't have to take care of itself, but it has the wherewithal and ability to take care of your soul and aid your soul. We need somebody or something with a soul that transcends the plight that we find ourselves, but understands the plight that we find ourselves and who can rescue us. So I'm sure you know where I'm going with this. If not Jesus, where will I go? I mean, honestly, where will I go in this life? Like, is it not enough to look around and realize how painful and challenging life on this planet is for us to come to the one conclusion that there is only one security, there is only one true confidence, there's only one person in human history, and he remains. His name is Jesus, and we can behold him, and we can read of him, and we can encounter him, and we can worship him, and we can talk to him, and we can rely on him. Is there anyone else like him? No. He's the only anchor in human history. David prays his ancient prayer in Psalm 61. In verse 2, he says, when my heart is overwhelmed, that's a soul, when my soul is overwhelmed, I need you, God, to lead me to you. I need a rock that is beyond my circumstance. I need a rock that is transcendent beyond my plight and my pit. I need you. You have a soul, but it's a flawless soul, and you understand my fragmented soul, and I need you to anchor me. I need you to stabilize me. I need you to secure me, and I need you to hold me. That's what I need, God. See, and that's my prayer this morning, that what God did for David, he can do for you. David was a murderer. David was an adulterer. David had prominence. David had pressure. David had stress. David was overwhelmed. David went through depression, and David uttered a heartfelt prayer that we can still pray today, because the same God that met with David in ancient times past is the same God that can meet with you today in 2015. Where else will I go? Peter said to Jesus. He said, do you think I'm going to leave you? He said, you're the only one that offers life to me. He says, you're it. He says, when my bank account fails me, and my prominence fails me, and my influence fails me, and my self-confidence fails me, and my identity fails me, and when people fail me, and even when church fails me, you will remain. And so I will tether my soul to you forever. He says, you're everything I need. He says, you're it. You're it. And so, friends, when it comes to being called and being led by God, it's going to come with challenges. It's going to come with fears. But don't let that stop you. Don't run the other direction. Instead, consider it a gift. I mean, when I look back at all my mistakes and all the broken pieces and how far Jesus had to go down into that pit to meet me, all I can do is look at that as a gift. Just, what it taught me, how I've grown from it, how I've matured. And most of all, that's how I met Jesus. He's our anchor. He's the only anchor. I can't promise you that you'll leave here and, the winds will cease and the waves will calm, but I can promise you that he will keep you in the midst. God, he has a hold of you. I promise you, he won't let go. If he doesn't let go of me, I know for a fact he doesn't let go of you